being in the house with my partner all day long has made it difficult.
I could have sex 3 times a day, every day. Right now, it is the last thing on my mind.
We don't have those chances throughout the day being apart from each other to start missing each other.
My sex drive is non-existent. It's creating a strange distance in my marriage. And honestly, I don't know how we'll turn this around when we come out of this time.
You are listening to a short film produced by the Sounds team of researchers, which was produced as a result of a quantitative study exploring the impact of COVID-19 on people's sexual life and behavior. And this will be the topic of today's show.
Once quarantine hit, I knew that wouldn't be the case for a while.
Hi, my name's Sam Breakgear and welcome to Brains Bite Back. This is the podcast looking to explore all things related to psychology and technology in our modern society. Since the start of the pandemic, many aspects of our regular lives have been turned upside down, and this seems to be also true for our sex lives. In fact, an article published by the Washington Post at the start of the pandemic stated that we might see a coronavirus baby blip as a result of couples isolated together looking to pass the time. Meanwhile, for singletons, it would seem that social distancing and quarantines have thrown a spanner in the works for any hopes of dating. In this episode of the podcast, we will explore how sexual behavior has been impacted by the quarantine. To discuss this topic, we'll be joined by a number of guests from different backgrounds, all working to better understand and help us navigate the complicated changes to our sex lives during these unusual times. To kick off the show, we are joined by Matt Rezai, the founder and CEO of UpGuys, a company that offers professional advice and prescription drugs with direct-to-door delivery and a strong focus on erectile dysfunction treatments. Matt shares with us how the company's client profile has changed since the start of the pandemic, why he believes we are witnessing this change, and what the impact of the pandemic will be on how men approach their sexual health in the future. Following Matt, we are joined by Jerusha Bennett, Senior Director of Brand Strategy and Innovation at The Sound, a brand strategy and product innovation agency, alongside her co-worker, Annie Pecoraro, the Director of Creative Analytics. They join us to discuss research conducted by the pair, which takes a quantitative look at the impact of COVID-19 on people's sexual life and behavior. They share with us findings such as how the quarantine has impacted masturbation, the lives of singletons, and what it means for couples with children who are home all the time. I hope you enjoy the show. Disclosure: this episode contains a client of an Espacio portfolio company. This episode is brought to you by Publicize, a digital PR company that grows businesses' online presence. And for a limited time only, exclusive to Brains Bite Back listeners, you can receive an SEO assessment as part of your package for any tier of service at no extra charge with this special promotion. To find out more, visit publicize.co/BBB. Matt, can you tell our listeners who you are and what UpGuys does and what you do for the company, please?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Matt Rezai, and I'm a pharmacist and the CEO and founder of UpGuys.com. In UpGuys, what we do is we have provided like a one-stop shop for men, particularly, to get their medical treatments from us. You say, as a user, come to our website, you talk to a doctor directly, and you choose your medication with the help of the doctor, and the next step is receiving the medication at your door. So if you're a man, you can be our customer.
Excellent. I think that the issues that you're helping guys with, I think it sounds like you've created an incredibly efficient solution to something which I suppose some men might have some hesitation towards, like dealing with, like going to their doctor and perhaps dealing with in the conventional sense. So I think that this sounds like a really smart solution.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so being a healthcare provider for over a decade now, this is what I've seen, that men are actually the part of the population who need more help with the healthcare system. For some reason, and I'm not sure why exactly, Sam, we men, are not the best when it comes to taking care of ourselves, physical, mental health. I don't see that reason really vividly. I have my guesses, but I see that women in general take a better care of their body, their mind than men. Like we just come with a flat out denial most of the time when someone brings up something about our health, and it takes us years sometimes to really address a health issue. So that is the idea behind having a specific healthcare system only for men. And so far, we see a very good response from men all over Canada.
That's awesome. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that there is this kind of like old mentality of, as a man, you just like shut up and deal with it and move on. But I think that's such an outdated and ridiculous kind of mentality to have. So it's good that men have the opportunity to use services like yours and take better care of themselves, definitely. But I'd be really interested to know specifically, how has the quarantine impacted sales of your products or behavior surrounding like your users relating to sexual health?
Interesting question. So we have different categories of the medications that we are covering, and we are adding basically categories on daily basis. We are adding hair loss, anxiety, different categories to our platform. But by far the most impact has been seen in our sexual health category. So let's start like this way. At the beginning, we had a dip of, I guess, people trying to figure out what's happening. I was emotionally experiencing that, like what's happening to myself, to my kids, like what's going to happen in future. I think most of us share this experience, and we saw that in the basically number of people or number of men who were reaching out at that time. And after that dip, the increase was amazing. It was a steady increase of men reaching out for their sexual health. I have some theories around it. I'm not honestly sure why that happened, but I do see that our customer base, men in general, in Canada at least, they are now more eager to take care of themselves. This is an interesting concept, Sam. Before COVID, and you try to make sense of it, before COVID, the majority of our customers were men, younger adults, who were just looking for, I would say, to just impress maybe a partner. There was no real erectile dysfunction when they were coming for an erection medication. It is still the case. Most of our customers, they don't have any dysfunction. They are like just looking for a self-improvement tool. And it was like mainly for short-term use of a medication to, I don't know, when you go for a date, they just wanted to impress the lover. Now, or like after COVID, it is very interesting that most of our customers are in long-term relationship. They kind of take on themselves to make something work better, to make sex more pleasurable for their partner. It's just like a moving thing actually to see that the clientele has changed a little bit, maybe because the life routines have changed a bit.
That's a really interesting shift. And I would be really interested to see more data around this. And I think it would take perhaps more of a qualitative approach, like interviews and stuff like that. And obviously it's somewhat personal. But at the same time, I think you're absolutely right. I think that certainly in this moment of quarantine, there's a lot of time for reflection. Also, like you said, a lot of partners which are stuck together, and perhaps they are just trying something new or just looking to take things up a notch. Do you have any other theories? You said you had a few theories around it.
Sure. I mean, I have a list of stuff that, I mean, we talked about this, trying to make sense of it, right? One theory that I have personally is the role of stress in basically relationships. So all of us experience that. No one was really ready for this level of change that happened. And that causes stress. Now, two things to consider. One, men normally perform when everything, I mean, sexually, they perform when everything else is working in their mind. Meaning that if you don't have the peace of mind that you need, men cannot fake it. It's just like it shows itself in the performance. Women can, I assume, but men just can't. It's just physiologically impossible for a man to fake an erection. Now, the interesting part is you have sex as one of the best stress relievers in everyone's disposal. And then, ironically, because of the level of stress that you have, because of like everything that's happening around you, all the worries that you have about job, economy, your kids' school, everything happening at the same time, you can't have access to that big stress reliever. So my idea here is many people, they realize that they need a little bit of help to just break this vicious cycle of stress and not performing, and it just builds up. Because if a guy cannot perform really at the time of sexual activity, now all of a sudden you have another dose of stress for the next time that you're trying to do it. And they just realize if there is any help to just break this, get back to normal, cope for that extra level of stress that they're enduring, that might be helpful. And I think that could be one of the reasons that we saw this increase in men reaching out. Another theory that is not really that much of a theory, I really saw that, was I think of COVID and the pandemic issue as kind of like an accelerator for getting us to the future, like a speeding up time that can have positive or negative consequences. But imagine this, 6 months ago, a year ago, when we were talking to our customers saying that like the doctor will call you or you're going to have this virtual meeting with the doctor, it was just such a foreign concept for most of them. Like, how it's even possible? And now telemedicine, telehealth, these stuff, like these kind of technologies, they went ahead to like 5 years from now. I was not expecting at all that this level of, or this method of communication between healthcare providers and patients becomes so mainstream, kind of like this flip of a switch. And this happened, and this kind of like revealed that it's still our current healthcare system. The healthcare system in a traditional way is just lacking a lot of elements. And maybe sometimes we need a disaster like what happened to bring up different tools to make that available to people to start utilizing them. And I hope that we don't go back to like the pure traditional way of doing things in healthcare right after the issue is resolved.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the one thing that is clear from this is that it's changed our perspective of how we approach things, exactly like you said. And I think travel's another one. I heard that travel is expected to go down after COVID, not just for the obvious reasons, but also because companies are now very aware that, oh, maybe it's not necessary that someone's sent off on a business trip, or maybe it's not necessary that people attend meetings physically as frequently as they do. And that obviously saves a lot of time and energy on behalf of the employees that do the traveling or commute. And of course, it saves on like greenhouse gases. So I think that this like necessity we've had to kind of adapt and change in some ways has made us more efficient in certain areas of our life. And I think that you gave an excellent example there. And I know that your team has been doing some work looking into the dynamics of relationships, of dating rather, during COVID. And could you tell us a little bit about what you and your team have found?
What we found is the idea of having a relationship, being a relationship, which has always been ever changing, has like made another change during the COVID time. Before that, we were saying a lot of basically traction happening in the hookup culture. Mainly, I would say the cost of being engaged in a relationship very soon, very fast, was not really high. So the tools were available, and the tools are available right now. You can basically find a partner pretty easily. There are apps, there are softwares, and websites help you doing that. And basically that was part of our culture, at least for the past 3 to 4 years, and was becoming more and more mainstream. What I see is we are going back a little bit towards more long-term, more committed relationships. My theory is now all of a sudden, first of all, the tools are not really that useful. People were locked down for a long time. Second, the risk or the cost of being in relationship with someone that you don't know enough about can actually be your life and the life of your loved ones. So my prediction is we are going back to a little bit more traditional sense of being in relationship. So if you have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, you just rather to be with them. If you don't, that was actually very interesting. I was looking at some data 2 months ago. Like many people, I don't have unfortunately the exact data right now, many people, that was a big decision that now we are going to say quarantine ourselves. Should we be together? So they think of couples that were not really that serious in their relationship. And now that lockdown is happening, should we actually move in? Are we that committed? And that is honestly something beautiful.
Yeah. It's funny you should mention about couples or short-term couples quarantining together. I'm not sure how to say that. Because a good friend of mine, she actually met a guy about a month or so before the quarantine came into effect. And they decided to pass it out together, and he moved in with her after only knowing each other for like a month. And things have gone really well, and they've actually, I think, have plans on continue living together even when the quarantine passes. So yeah, it's almost like steroids for like a good kind of like relationship.
And the other way around too. So you've heard of like couples that now they are kind of like stuck together for months and months, and I think even that is positive. So they looked into a relationship that was supposed to be like a long-term committed one, and they see that it is not working. It is dysfunctional if you cannot really live under the same roof for a long time. So that's why they say like after COVID is hopefully one day resolved, we're going to have a lot of marriages and a lot of divorces as well.
Yeah. So my last question to you, what impact will the pandemic have on the way men treat sexual health in the long term, do you think?
I think with the availability of telehealth, telepharmacy, telemedicine, we just stumbled upon a very good solution for men in particular. Men want to remain a little bit anonymous. They want to talk to people that like they are not too close to them. Unfortunately, many of the conditions, sexual conditions in particular, they are stigmatized in the society. So I think COVID pushed all of us to figure out how we need to deal with these type of conditions. And because of the success that happened in that area, UpGuys is just one of the examples. I believe that this positive trend will continue. Like a negative part of that, I am very worried about the mental health issues that would be the result of this pandemic. And I believe that is the real second wave of COVID, really. So I hope that we can use all of the experience that now we have dealing with, again, a stigmatized condition and kind of utilize that for the second wave that would be stress, depression, anxiety related to like the post-COVID issues. I'm both worried and also hopeful that there would be solution, because the solution is handed to us like during this hard time. I think that would be the challenge of if a year from now we're talking, and if hopefully after a while the actual issue of COVID is resolved, I believe the mental health issues that come with that would be the main challenge to deal with. The sexual health, however, is kind of now taken care of. We have the magic formula that, oh, okay, it worked perfectly during that time. We did all the tweaks that we need to do, and this tool is now available for men to take advantage of.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think that the psychological impacts from this will be incredible to see. Just not all great, but also I think that there'll be a mixture, because obviously I think this quarantine has brought a lot of people closer together, and also it really highlights the fact that we're all the same. It doesn't matter how rich you are or where you are. Like, everyone's impacted by this equally across the world. So it doesn't really discriminate in that sense. But yeah, definitely I think there will be some negative mental health issues that come from this. I know that virtual healthcare is becoming more prevalent, and I can imagine that during this time it probably has spiked. And I hope that that can be a remedy to some of the issues that people face. But I suppose only time will tell. So we'll have to wait and see. Matt, if people want to follow you guys at Up Guys, what's the best way for them to do that? Is there a social media you can point them to, or your website?
Sure, yeah. Our website is upguys.com. That's upguys.com. And if they want to follow us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, we are at upguyshealth.
Awesome. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
Would we be able to start with you both introducing yourselves, a little bit about who you are and what you do, please? Jerusha, if you want to go first.
Perfect. Yes, Jerusha Bennett. I'm a senior director of innovation and brand strategy at The Sound, which is an insight strategy and an innovation agency. And my background is predominantly in design and brand strategy, and really understanding human motivation behind their behavior, and then how that really impacts their choices around brand and decision making.
Awesome. Thank you. And Annie, would you be able to do the same, please?
Yeah, so I'm Annie Pecoraro. I'm a director of creative analytics at The Sound. And that is our very intentional, kind of fancy term for quantitative research. And we call it creative analytics because we really believe in kind of the humanity and the beauty and the creativity in data. So whether that's actual survey answers or text or voices or images, almost everything can be seen as a data point. And I've spent my career really, trying to bring that humanity to quantitative data and bring it to life in a really interesting and insightful way to help clients solve their business challenges.
Awesome. And I think you did a really good job in this case. And I'm not going to go into detail too much. I'll leave that to you folks. But I checked out the video that you produced as a result of the study we're going to discuss. And it really was beautiful. It was like a really beautiful interpretation of this quantitative data. And it was almost like an art piece. But I suppose before I go into any more detail now, I'd love to get your description of what it is that you embarked on here. So could you tell us what the motivation was to conduct this study, and how was the study conducted?
Yeah, absolutely. Just for context, The Sound is an insight strategy and innovation agency. So truly, we are curious by nature and really driven to understand human behavior. To be honest, though, the motivation to conduct this particular study came about when a team member dialed into a meeting a few minutes late, and they were rather flushed, and had let us know, sort of a little bit embarrassed, that they had seized the one moment that they had during lockdown amidst kids and pets and working from home 24/7, that had presented itself for intimacy, a moment of intimacy with their partner. Of course, we all had a good laugh the moment and appreciated the honesty, but it got us thinking because it was an incredibly relatable moment. And because it was relatable to our core team, we recognized it likely rather relatable to people more broadly. And so we really wanted to set upon understanding that everyone's sex lives are likely being impacted in different ways during this lockdown time, during COVID and this forced quarantine, and in some instances, forced separation from loved ones and partners. So why not explore it? And plus, to be honest, we're a rather bold and candid team anyhow. So there's no topic is off limits for us. This felt really like a natural fit for us to dig deeper and explore.
Awesome.
And so the way that we did that, we kind of always try to think about the end in mind. What did we want to come out on the back of this endeavor with? And we knew we wanted it to be real and human and creative and playful and bold. So not just a stodgy survey, tell us about your sex life on a scale of 1 to 5, and not just, hey, let's have a conversation about your sex life, but really marrying the two of those things. So we conducted first kind of an audit of what else was out there. Is anyone asking about people's sex lives or talking about it? We were definitely aware of certain conversations happening and other studies taking place. So we started there to understand, well, what are they asking and what are they not asking? And using that as kind of context, we designed our own survey. So we did want to speak and get a quantitative read from a number of people, but we designed that survey in a way that it was also playful. So not just kind of boring survey questions, but we gave people the chance to, hey, share a meme or an image or a GIF that best describes your sex life right now. Tell us a story that exemplifies how you're feeling about sexuality during the pandemic. So we used a really creative set of questions to prompt people to get the answers we were looking for. And then we also married that with having real conversations with people that they were very open to continuing the conversation and the dialogue. So at the end of our field work, so to speak, we had not only a set of quantitative results with survey questions that we could analyze, but we had people's text responses that they had typed into a number of open ends. We had images to analyze, and then we had actual one-on-one conversations with people from which we could then build that beautiful film as well as the report.
I feel jealous of many couples quarantining together.
I now have 0 sex life.
Around the time quarantine started, I was just starting to think about the idea of dating again. Once quarantine hit, I knew that wouldn't be the case for a while.
It really makes me appreciate skin-to-skin contact.
And how were the participants sourced for this experiment, or study rather?
Great question. So in this case, because we wanted it to be pretty fast and real and also a little bit creative, we kind of went to the streets on this one rather than going with a traditional panel and kind of sending things out and having all these different quotas. We realized this is a topic that not everyone is going to want to talk about, but let's see what we can find, and let's see who's willing to engage with us on it. So we kind of went to our own networks of people. We went to social media and we said, look, we're curious. We want to know about the whole range of behavior that's happening. And maybe you're a person that's not comfortable talking about sex with someone one-on-one, but you're willing to share our, to fill out our survey and answer some questions about it. So we went with a pretty organic approach on this, which I think just enabled us to do it really quickly and also get some pretty authentic answers that we may not have gotten had we gone the traditional route.
I would love to get into like the meat of this, like understanding what did your research show. Would you be able to dive into a little bit about what the research did show?
And I can start before Annie gets into some of the meat of it. But I would say that going into it, we really weren't sure, of course, as with any study, what it might look like. And certainly we had some hypotheses, that this could be sort of painting a picture of either, just very intercourse heavy narrative or the absence of that entirely. We sort of were wondering how binary the results would be. And I think one of the most surprising and more encouraging findings that we had was that while, COVID, of course, has had a negative impact on a lot of people's lives, there's no shortage of optimism and a sense of opportunity moving forward. And so I'll let Annie talk a little bit more in detail around what that looks like. But I think there was some really interesting pieces that came out of this.
Yeah, building on that, I think I was really encouraged that even though it was very clear, when we asked people, all these different questions and we asked them to share their stories, it's very clear that people's situations have a huge impact on how they responded. If they're single, you single people out there, you're having a tough time. I feel for you. Most of them were quarantining alone, and a lot of their traditional avenues for dating and sexual interaction had been taken away. And that was really reflected in the data. So on the one hand, those people were rating their sex lives as non-existent, or, if I could give it a 0 out of 5 stars, I would. So, not surprising there. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where, hey, we're quarantining together and we don't have kids and our jobs are flexible, so we're going at it like rabbits. I think that even though there was this spectrum, which was heavily influenced by people's situations, there was a recognition that, you know what, this won't last forever. This is temporary. And while it might be rough for me right now, I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I feel like that was the encouraging part for us. Another interesting thing, which maybe not earth-shattering, but I think is really important, is one of the biggest behaviors that people said they would change in the future. You know, we asked people to think about, okay, do you think you're going to be masturbating more than you are now in the future? Or, you know, are you still going to be doing all this dirty texting? Maybe you're doing it a lot now. Do you think you'll be doing that more in the future? One of the biggest changes we saw was, I think it was over 30% of people expected that they would be discussing their physical and sexual health with partners more in the future. And I think that's a really positive step. We know that sexual health is really tied to overall health. We know that mental health and emotional health is so important. And often there's a stigma associated with being that vulnerable and opening up. So I think we saw that as really encouraging, that this has really shifted how people think about their health holistically, and they're more open to being that vulnerable with a partner in the future.
Yeah, and we sort of coined this notion of it being almost a sexual reset among people during this time. Really, again, regardless of life stage now, I think that sexual reset is both within themselves and within perspective or current partners. So really a watershed moment in sexuality and pleasure and sort of what people's perspectives are on their bodies and their own needs.
I gotta say, I'm really interested to see what the domino effect is going to be from this. This is a time for reflection, I'm sure, for many. So perhaps it will change the attitudes towards future behaviors or future actions collectively. Yeah.
And I think this is something that, given, you know, the work that we're hoping this feeds into, is eventually helping to inform how brands might be engaging with people differently or more authentically in this space of pleasure and sexual well-being and sex positivity. That idea that the dialogue can be opened in a different way now. There's sort of a new baseline that we've all experienced on a global scale that has changed, and you know, I think there's the opportunity to really engage with people differently in this space and sort of speak more at a human, honest, vulnerable level than perhaps these brands have done in the past.
Yeah, I definitely think that this has opened up a more kind of like humane perspective to the world, because everyone's affected by this globally. So I think there's definitely an understanding that we're all in this together. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I would love for anyone listening to this to go check out the video and also your results. If people do want to check out the video and see the work you've done, what is the best way for them to find this online?
Great question. So they can go to thesoundhq.com and click on blog, and it's right there.
Excellent. Well, I'd highly encourage anyone listening to go check that out. And Annie and Jerusha, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Sam. Great to talk with you.
I miss sex and physical touch a lot.
I am excited about the shift and kind of having to reevaluate my personal position with sex.
Once again, thank you to our sponsor, Publicize. Visit their website if you want to find out more about their PR for growth packages, their free resources, or even schedule a call. And for a limited time only, exclusive to Brains Bite Back listeners, you can receive an SEO assessment as part of your package for any tier of service at no extra charge with this special promotion. To find out more, visit publicize.co/BBB. That is it for today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us. If you like this, then you can check out more episodes just like this at sociable.co, and you'll also find many articles on topics exactly like this. And to keep up to date with the podcast, you can follow us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher. Anywhere you find your podcast, we will be there, I promise you. And if not, let us know. At The Sociable, you can tweet at us, let us know what you think of this episode, let us know what you want to hear for future episodes, and just generally tell us how we're doing. We'd love to hear from you. So until the next episode, take care.